Where do mate preferences come from in the Breen and otherwise?
Look in my eyes and tell me if you see the slightest glimmer of doubt. Go, Doug.
Love it.
Through.
Those topics and more in this week's BioTrekkie with the Admiral, starting now. Welcome back to BioTrekkie with the Admiral. I'm Mohamed Noor. I'm a biology professor at Duke University, and I'm an occasional science consultant for the Star Trek universe.
I'm Jayne Brook, and I played Admiral Katrina Cornwell in the first 2 seasons of Discovery. And I just love being here talking to my friend Mohamed about all things biology in Star Trek Discovery. And this will be our last BioTrekkie with the Admiral, talking about Star Trek Discovery. Yeah, last 2 episodes of the season and the show. So this will be, fun and bittersweet.
Definitely.
So Mohamed, what we normally do is Mohamed chooses 3 topics about biology that he caught in episodes, in this case, 9 and 10. So take it away, Mohamed, and tell us what jumped out at you.
Sure thing. So for episode 9, there wasn't a whole lot of biology, but there was one little scene there with Book flirting with one of the Breen. So it got me thinking a little bit about what is the origin of mating preferences more generally across species, mostly on Earth. We'll forget the Breen for now. In episode 10, I want to talk a little bit more about the origin of life, which, that matches also even the episode name, some of the intentionality around it. And I had one little random comment that I just like, that little deer thing at the very end. It had good crypsis and stuff.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
cute.
Yeah. The animatronic deer.
Yeah.
So, okay, so on to what did you call it? Mating preferences.
Mating preferences, yeah. So typically speaking, when we think about mating preferences, we tend to focus on especially female mating preferences, but obviously this could apply to males as well. So the question is, where do mating preferences come from? Like, why is it that females of most species have some sort of preference for a particular kind of male, for a particular trait in males or things like that? And there's a lot of possible explanations for this. One of them, like probably one of the simplest explanations, is often referred to as direct benefits, right? That maybe for some reason a female prefers a male that actually provides her with some sort of resource, and there's something visible about him that actually allows him to, or that makes it clear what sort of resource he's going to provide. So as one example, in a lot of insect species and some other species, the males will provide what's referred to as a nuptial gift. So literally, like at the same time they pass over the spermatophore, there might be this big nourishing sac with it, which females then, when they accept the male, they're also accepting this nourishing sac. So that's good. You're getting some food along with your nookie. So something good there.
Very interesting.
Yeah, the big sac might be really good. A related one, sort of the converse of the same thing. Generally speaking, people are not attracted to individuals who look sick. And probably part of it there is, again, there's a benefit to like avoiding the sick guys because you don't want to get what they've got. I've got a little cold right now, so maybe people can even detect there's a little bit of that going on. Sorry if I'm repulsive right
now. No. So carry on.
Sure. But there's an interesting one that I want to talk about, and this involves what's referred to as an indirect benefit. It has a really interesting dynamic. So I'm going to try to walk this one through. It's kind of a long example. I hope it's okay. But it's interesting that basically the mere existence of a female preference and the existence of a preferred trait makes it so they spread, which doesn't sound intuitive, but let me explain why. So imagine that you had a population, and let's say in this population, males can be red or blue, okay? Just arbitrarily. So that's the trait. And let's say there's a subset of females, and don't worry about what color the females are, it doesn't matter. Let's say there's a subset of females that like red, and there's a subset of females that don't care, okay? So from the male side, from the male trait side, it's pretty obvious it's better to be red, right? Because then not only would you mate with the females that don't care, but you also mate with the females who specifically prefer red. And in fact, the females who prefer red will probably almost exclusively mate with the red males. So it's obvious why the trait would spread. What's less obvious and what's interesting is there's a dynamic that results from this. those males that have red, right? They produce what's referred to as sexy sons. So the sons will inherit the red trait from the dad, but they will also inherit the female's preference for red, right? Because disproportionately, those red males mated with the females who preferred red. So essentially, that's been embedded into them. So now when they have daughters, now the red preference gene is actually more abundant. And this cycles over and over again. So over time, you'll see not only will the red trait spread, but actually the preference for red will actually spread at the same time. It's
And
really
then
fascinating.
eventually, will you have only those insects who prefer red because they'll just push out the ones who don't care?
Yeah. So what happens is essentially the red trait will go to 100%. So all males will be red. And the females, the vast majority will prefer the red trait too. And it's an interesting automatic thing. And it's, you can do computer simulations of it. I've actually done it myself. It's fascinating because like literally just the existence is there. There's nothing about being red that actually makes it so you're better or healthier or
Right.
more vigorous. It's literally just the existence of a preference and the existence of a preferred trait makes the two become associated and spread together.
So I
Fascinating.
have two comments or questions about. The first thing is that I never considered that in nature, it's the female. You said, well, of course, we normally talk about mate preference in terms of females, but me being a civilian and not a biologist, I
Ah,
didn't know we always talked about it in terms of females. I mean, I knew that the male, displayed feathers or whatever he did to attract the female,
yeah,
but I never knew that he wasn't deciding on a specific female as well.
yeah,
He just wants some female to go with him,
yeah. Well,
um,
the thing is,
generally speaking.
no, it's a great question. So part of it is again, this comes back to something we talked about in one of the previous weeks too, is males can mate with a whole bunch of females, right? So they and essentially their
Um,
potential reproductive output is very high. The females, in contrast, they're much more limited in terms of how many males they can mate with and actually produce offspring from them.
oh,
So,
of course.
yeah,
I hadn't
so
thought of that. So he's like, one night with this one, I don't have to choose because I'll be with someone else. Okay, I
exactly, like
get
there's a better one over there. Well, I'll take her too.
yeah, and
It's all
maybe she'll
good.
have. And then the other thing I wanted to say, I was thinking if I was a biologist and I was studying a particular insect that I could see in this slice of time that some females didn't care and some females preferred red.
Yeah.
I mean, how many years or centuries or thousands of millennium would it take for the red to become 100%? I mean, like one generation of scientists couldn't observe that. You all have to jump on each other's shoulders to observe that evolution, right?
Well, it depends on the organism, right? Because part of it's going to depend on it'll depend on a couple of things. Number one, it'll depend on the generation time. So if you're working with fruit flies, like you get a generation every 2 weeks. So you can have things happen pretty quick over a scientist's lifetime. This is every 2 weeks you have
Oh,
a generation. The other thing is it depends on the strength of the preference, right? So will the female like only mate with like red males? Or do they just have a 10% advantage for like, oh, I kind of like red, but blue's okay. So
so
those
one
two.
scientist can observe this change over time and write papers about make graphs about the increase,
Mhm.
until it's 100%. Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, that's neat.
Actually, I forgot one example too in terms of direct benefits. I was thinking direct benefits to the female, but sometimes there's actually direct benefits to that are unrelated to mating too. So, for example, there's a guppy species that very much likes orange males, like very strongly so. But it's thought that maybe part of the reason for that preference is because the fruit that it eats is orange. So it's just kind of attuned to the color orange. And when it turned out that some male had a mutation to orange, and he was like, oh, look at him. And then, oops, oh, it's just a guy, and they mate.
Oh, how interesting.
Right?
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's a couple of examples like that too. There's like a little water mite too, where the males will come and they'll like shake their little legs in front of the female at exactly the frequency of its prey. And the female will then jump on it. But no, it's just doing
And
that so
they're
it can
like, ah,
exactly. It's like, I got you, mate.
wow. Wow.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Nature's fascinating and the stuff it'll take advantage of to make things come together.
And
But yeah, I
that this
love
all came up because of book flirting with the Breen
Yeah.
and being like, this is getting a little uncomfortable here. How long are you going to be? You know, what's this going to be? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And it is true that the voice there we heard of the Breen sounded like a male voice, but hey, we don't know what the genders are like in Breen. You know, maybe they have.
Right.
All we know they have six
We
genders.
don't, we don't know anything about them. Yeah.
Don't know anything about them, so don't know what was
You
going
know,
on.
they flirt a little bit.
Yep, that's about as much as we got.
That's funny.
Yeah, but I love
So
that.
you're,
I love that
oh,
sexy
sorry.
sun sexual selection. That's what that's called, the sexy sun sexual selection. Just the mere existence of the two just makes them both spread. To me, that's fascinating. I love it.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
very cool.
yeah.
Um, now your second topic was origin of life.
Yeah, coming back to a little bit about it. So this, obviously, this is something we talked about in earlier episodes because we discussed the setup for the overall season in the context of these progenitors, and they talked in this particular one about the cycle of creator and creation and things like that. And I thought one interesting thing there was that the progenitors here apparently were not the original seeders of all life, but just were like almost like a midpoint because there was something that they said that they had found this device or place
That's
or
right. They
whatever.
found that wonderful world. Okay, yeah.
Exactly. But it lends an interesting perspective that there needs to be some sort of intentionality around the origin of life. And that that's not something I would have perceived as necessary because it's interesting. We tend to think of life as incredibly improbable, which yeah, I'm sure it is. Life is incredibly improbable. That said, the universe is a really, really, really big place,
Really big.
right? The convergence of things needed to get it, like I can't. I mean, we don't know for sure since we've only identified the one origin of life, but given what we've seen with, for example, I talked about the Uri Miller experiments a while back and things like that. I find it hard to imagine that something that wouldn't be called life has not arisen many other times, other places, with no intentionality whatsoever. And related to that, it was interesting too that the amount of energy that seemed to be required for this. Remember, like that device was like pulling tons of energy from this dual black holes. Like this does not seem required. It seems like overkill for making life. Honestly, like if I was to guess, now this is truly speculation. If I was to guess, I would be surprised, shy of any sort of dystopian future that we might have, shy of that between now and say the time of discovery in 3200s, I would be very surprised if we have not multiple times made something that is basically by all definitions life. I would be very surprised.
Oh, yeah, because that's like, I don't know, over 1,000 years in the future. It's like 3,400. It's like 1,000 years ahead of Enterprise and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if honestly it happened in our lifetimes. I mean, it's.
Right, right.
I mean, the Miller-Urey experiments were from the 1950s, and those made precursors for life. Admittedly, it didn't go all the way, but like it made precursors for life. There's been a lot of progress since that time. It just doesn't seem that hard.
Well, at
I mean,
first
again, it
they
hasn't
did the
happened.
cloning, and that seemed impossible. And
Yeah,
that was kind of creating life. I mean, from a cell or whatever. But yeah, yeah, some form. Some of these robots, I got to tell you, this is not the life that you're talking about. You're talking about biology
I was thinking of them
with,
too, though. Yeah,
flesh and everything. But my husband's friend was friends with a guy who does CG and showed him uh some of the robots, not the ones that work in factories, that make things, but the robots that have been created like humans.
yeah,
And oh my, it was unbelievable how these things would run and jump and tumble. And you actually automatically anthropomorphize them. I mean, you would be like, oh, that one's cute. Look at that, one running around. And that was kind of freaky. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Have you watched Black Mirror much?
Oh no, I haven't.
Okay, there's like a robot dog episode, which is kind of terrifying. Black Mirror. Black Mirror is a good, like, as implied by the name, it's a good sort of beware of technology sort of TV
Right,
series.
right. Yeah, he showed me a dog as well, but the
Yeah,
humans were unbelievable.
yeah.
Um,
One thing I did like that they did, which I liked a lot actually, they did in this episode. Um, I was very nervous they were just going to somehow just revive Locke and he'd be okay. And I was thinking, like, from a biological aspect, that's going to be ridiculous. They
Wait,
didn't do that.
that they would revive Locke. Yeah.
Yeah,
After how long? I mean, how long has he been lying there, his
yeah.
body? Yeah.
And just the necessary would be the same technology that to revive life would be the same as for creating life. Like something that's going to make this bacterium or something like that. It's going to be something that can fix locks. And I was very nervous that's where it was going to go. I was very relieved, like, oh, thank goodness. And actually, the specific thing they said was actually, I thought, really good. They're saying like we could essentially like basically clone him. Like essentially they could run a program from his genetic code, but he would have none of his experiences and none of his memories and things like that.
Right.
Good. Yes, that's exactly right. Go Discovery writers. Thank you for not doing the ridiculous. That was
Right.
awesome.
Right. Right. Right.
I was very
Now,
relieved by that.
um, there's a question of evolution, how things evolve, evolution with the progenitors, and there wasn't a lot of talk about any kind of evolution. And I think that's what you're referring to. It was only talk about an intentionality. I mean,
The
I
origin of
have
it. Yeah.
something I can say about that too, because I mean, I'll say it right now since we're talking about it. I
Please.
mean, it seemed to me that they have such great imaginations, the writers, and the seed people who did the CG and that world that was created in the episode 10. I mean, it was so um, really cool and just showed the wide limits of human imagination. But the writers were clearly respecting mystery or respecting the fact that a finite mind, no matter how much of a genius and how much of an artist and an imaginative person, cannot wrap its head around something infinite. Something finite can't give ultimate answers like that. I mean, they're two different things. So I think that's what they were trying to respect, that they weren't going to sit in a writer's room and come up with, because there were other issues about it as well, that they were addressing technology and how it needed to be controlled. So we've
Yep.
just spoken about that with the
Yep.
dogs. And so, yeah. But anyway, we're not finished with your biology.
No, I'm pretty close. I mean, that there wasn't a whole lot of biology because they didn't really elaborate like how this device worked. And that I would have been really interested to see that, but it also would have been like impossible because I mean that's an incredibly high bar for them to be like explain, a good scenario for the full origin of life. Like that would have been a very high bar.
That would have been, yeah, that would have been like so definitive,
Yeah, it would have been very hard. But I
yeah,
mean, honestly, that actually follows what Dr. Erin McDonald, who's the main science advisor for the universe, always says. She said, if something is really, really tough, just don't explain it. And that's what they did. They're like, all right,
better to step away, and she's their consultant, because unless you can have a theory of some sort, you're stepping away from science. And Star Trek is science fiction, but it
yeah,
still has science consultants. And
yeah,
um but no, there was what I mean, we already talked about seeding the universe, which comes up in that final episode, but we
yeah,
talked about that in other seasons. I mean, you saw in episode 10 all the plants and everything. So that
yeah.
was not, I thought that, so we talked about all three.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really have anything else to say about the deer. It was
Right,
just
right.
cool. It had good crypsis. It was good in terms of being like hidden in the background there. So that was good.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Um,
overall, I mean, it was enjoyable. It was a great ride, worthy finale for the series. So and I
yeah.
especially loved the very tail end. Like, oh, it was so moving.
Oh, that was so, I mean, going backwards, I mean, going from the end backwards, that did touch me
Yeah,
deeply. Seeing Burnham and Book as these gorgeous older people who had clearly had a life, and then they
yeah,
see then the sun, the wonderful sun comes. I mean, that was really, really the most moving part of these two episodes
yeah.
for
Agreed.
me. And before we started recording, we were talking about, because it was one of the questions I did have while watching episode 10. I put a question in my notes. I wonder, this is before I figured it out. I wonder what they filmed after they heard this would be the very last episode, but it was very clear where the ending of that
Yep.
episode was going to be. Who knows what the future will bring? That beautiful scene on the beach with Book and Burnham. And, that's to me seemed like the end of the episode. I was like, oh, what a beautiful end. Who knows what the future will bring, bringing them into another season. And then they had to think again because it was going to be the end of the series and they added the last part, but that was quite beautiful. That was really beautiful to see. Very, just very nostalgic and heartwarming. I did wonder, I mean, going from there, because I have something to say, some little things to say about 9 and the rest of 10, but that beautiful montage they had of Burnham hugging everybody,
I was about to comment on that.
it
Yeah.
did seem to come from episodes during the 5 years, but I
Oh,
wasn't sure if they somehow just got everyone back and did hugs. I wondered because I don't think she ever hugged Tig Navarro's character,
oh,
but she did in the montage. I was just
good.
wondering if they cut together some hugs that had happened over the course of the 5 seasons and then filled it in. Anyway, that's just a little
Maybe.
question.
That's an interesting question. I was gonna comment. I thought it was interesting they brought back like Ronnie Rowe Jr., who's been gone. It's like, oh, he's back. Okay.
Right. No, they brought back everybody who had been part of that ship,
Yeah,
but I don't know that they brought, I mean, that was just a
that's a
question in
good
my
question.
mind,
Yeah,
like a
I didn't even think
production
about that.
question.
I just
I was like,
assumed it was
wow,
new.
where did they get all these hugs in the footage? And then, you know, um, but yeah, watching episodes 9 and 10, I'm always struck by the sets. I'm always struck by the imagination, the CG, all of that. Little things like it was fun to see Patrick sit in the chair for a second. Like, I don't know exactly why his character was there. I think Raynor just didn't want to sit in the chair or something, but it was really, that was fun. That was fun to see him sit in the chair. I mean, he got right up.
Did
You
you see?
know,
Did you see online? It said that like while he was sitting in the chair, I don't remember if it was for episode 9 or maybe even for episode 8. Apparently, while he was sitting in the chair, like his wife was in labor with their first baby.
oh, and so just for fun, they put him in the chair?
Well, no,
Oh, no.
I think it's just independent. I think it's just independent, but it's fascinating. Like that was the point in time when his wife was in labor. Like, oh, that's intense. You probably really were stressed out holding on to that chair.
Oh, how funny. Oh, wow. Well, I definitely noticed that, and that was fun. And then, I have already talked about overall themes, but they wrapped it up with build the shape of the many, build the shape of the one among the many. They've been trying to do this all season. There's diversity. We don't have to all be the same. We can be, unity doesn't mean uniform, so they've been talking about that. Um, yeah, I wrote biology of preserving a body again. We've already gone over that because I'm like, how are they getting locked? I also, little tiny moment, but when Indira, when they go onto the Breen ship and she says, I think it was when they were on the ship, but she's like, everyone always picks on the ensign.
That was a great line. I love it when
That
they
was
said that.
funny, that was very funny. Uh, I miss the crew. I miss the bridge crew. I gotta say, I miss the bridge crew. I liked Raynor and Tilly together. Um,
They were a great pair.
I, yeah, they're bringing in themes of couples like Saru and Tarina. They both chose lives of service, so they have to figure out how do they have these big jobs and still think about the relationship. So, they're trying to get that in there. Um, let's see. I always have my notes by my side because I have all these um
Smart.
yeah.
Like
Um,
all the
I
students to do.
liked Saru when he said diplomacy cannot succeed if both parties threaten violence. That was because it's just, and he's successful. And I've got to say, my favorite moment, which was a bit of the teaser, when Doug Jones did that moment, he was excellent.
Yeah.
When he said, do you know, do I look like I'm doubting? Look in my eyes. That he did such a good job. That was my favorite Saru moment of the entire series, I think. Um, they did a great fight. That fight went on and on between Burnham and Maul. It just went on and on and on. That was well done, well
I was gonna ask you about
choreographed.
that. That seemed like it must have been really complicated. I can't imagine how they were filming that.
Yeah, because it was all a fake. Well, I guess they just did it and then they had to do the computer. Like we said in a previous episode, you have to really plan those computer shots, I mean, the CG.
Yeah.
So I have no hats off to them. That was
Yeah,
hats off to the
very impressive.
choreographer, the editor, the director. I'm like the actors, they all did a great job.
Very impressive.
Um, so let's see. Yeah, they kept going after the technology, after the technology, after the technology. And then, um, I always think of the actor's name now, but like Anthony Rapp's
Paul
character
Stamets.
saying, this is the greatest scientific discovery. And then they all have to back off because they realize it's just too much, it's too much
Yeah.
pressure. But yeah, I mean the whole journey of Burnham from beginning to end, they really did a great arc on her, like where she ends up in this position where she's going to have this origin of life, she's going to be responsible for everything. And it was really great. She took the time to say, I got to think about this, and then realized we got to let this thing go.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
It was a smart call because I mean, I can't imagine how you could protect everything from it. Because yes, she'll have it, but then if she has it, everybody has it because she's part of the Federation, right? So,
Right. And also, the progenitors tried to say to her, look, we weren't perfect either. Clearly, they had that burn, or I mean, they had that, burn or whatever you call it. They had
little
the
gravestone
memorial
thing.
to the scientist that was a progenitor who did the wrong thing with it, and killed himself.
Yeah.
So they said, we're not perfect either. We trust you. But so that, I mean, it was nice to say none of us is perfect, but I'm glad they gave it up. They did a beautiful montage about the beauty of life, all which had the beauty of biology, the biological.
I love the color schemes in those, like the purple flowers and stuff. It's like, oh,
Oh, it
that's
was just
really pretty.
beautiful, that montage. It was like a National Geographic montage.
Totally.
Um, yeah, we're all connected, the
Yep.
future. I mean, I wrote, they did this cool thing, and I'd love to talk to the DP about how he did it. But when they were on the beach, Burnham and Book, twice it happened. And I don't know if it was, well, it probably happened and they edited it, but they had it in two shots in the edit. But did you notice how I don't know what you call it, they had a perfectly oval spherical shaped or oval shaped ring of light around Burnham and Book on two of the close-ups, once when they were talking, once when they were kissing.
Yeah.
And the sunlight, because they were backlit, the sunlight goes into the camera and sometimes flares, but it was
Yeah.
like this perfect. I don't know if it's one of those things where the DP could create that, or it was like they looked at the footage and you're like, oh my God, because it was like this magical um oval
I
around
didn't
them.
pick
It
up
was
on
really
that. That's
cool.
fascinating.
Yeah, it was really cool. And then we talked about the end, how beautiful that was. And
Yeah.
it was beautiful, beautiful, that montage of having every person who'd been on that bridge, who'd been working on that ship,
Yeah.
that was a nice way of
No,
saying
No Lorca though.
goodbye.
I
Oh yeah, Lorca. I don't think they'd be hugging Lorca.
don't think
I
they'd
don't,
be
yeah,
hugging
no, no,
Lorca.
no. I don't think they'd be hugging Lorca. And Michelle Yeoh, I don't think they had Michelle Yeoh's character. You know how she was briefly the captain, but
That's
not
right.
really. I mean, it was the mirror.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but it was, yeah, um, I really liked the season and the themes that they were attacking, and the actors did a great job. Everybody did a great job. We've talked about all the different departments, but yeah.
Which one was your favorite season of the five?
Well, the one that's most in your mind is this last one.
Yeah, it's
So I'm going
always
to
six.
say,
Yeah.
I'm going to say five,
Yeah.
but I would have to watch them all again. There were things I loved about every season.
Same.
There's things that are really dear about when a show starts
Yeah.
that are really great. And then it matured with Burnham into this. So, yeah.
I actually just recently watched the episode where your character died. It was I think there's like Paramount streaming, so it just had
Oh, right,
Star Trek
right.
channel playing all the time, and it had that one. I can't remember what it was called, the Such Sweet Sorrow Part Two or something like.
Oh,
But I remember watching that, and I was like,
wow.
so sad. I'm like, no.
Oh, I haven't watched that in such a long time. I mean, when I think back to my time, I think of scenes with Mary Chieffo, like the scene where she was like supposed to be torturing me, or the scene where I talked to her in the brig. I mean, there were some
Yeah.
really um, those were favorites, you know, from my personal,
Yeah.
or me having to do this long, long monologue with all these tough place names as I went around the conference table. I remember that for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
But so those are personal memories that are really good. But yeah.
I remember one of my favorite lines was in season two, and I think you were, yeah, you were in the seasons, you were in the scene I'm talking about too, where the question was sort of like, or how are we going to solve this thing? And then Michelle Yeoh's character said, just set off an explosion, it'll just destroy the quadrant, and then we're done. And then everybody looked at her and she said, I thought there were no bad ideas. And you were like, that's a bad one.
Oh, that's a bad one, right? That's a funny line. That's the
That was a
bad one.
great line.
That's funny. I mean, I like when that humor slips in, you know.
Totally, totally. And actually, the series overall did that pretty well. Like it's very good at slipping in these just sort of one-liners. Like, oh, that was good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Always pick on the ensign from
Always
this
pick on
one,
the
and yeah,
ensign. That was a great
yeah.
example of
There's
that
some
right
good ones.
there. Yeah.
So yeah, that those are my final thoughts.
No, I don't
We have
want
to
to give you
thank
the end.
everyone for watching our BioTrekkie with the Admiral. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. And thank you, Jayne, for doing this project with me. This has been a fantastic project from the very beginning. I
Well,
could not be more appreciative and more honored that you've done this with me. Thank
wow. Thank you for asking me. It was a great idea. I mean,
you.
you know, you said, "Hey, I have this idea," and I was like, "Cool." I was a biology major for a very, very short time.
There
Let's
you
do it.
go. There you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Great.
Thanks everybody for watching. We will have one more video release, which will just be our blooper reel coming out. But otherwise,
Oh,
thanks.
blooper reel. Yeah.
Yeah, can't forget that one. So
That'll be
otherwise,
fun.
thanks for engaging in this wonderful ride with us, and big thanks to Michelle Paradise, all the Discovery cast,
Yes.
crew, creatives, everybody. Thanks for
Giving
a
us
great
a lot to talk about. Thank you so
totally,
much.
totally. Take care,
You,
all.
look how well I can do that with my left hand.
You got
Left
it.
hand.
Yes.
All right. Finally. Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.